All right. We are back with another episode of Content is for Closers. It's your boys. Some are calling us influencers, Carlton. Some are calling us the influencers of the content marketing podcast space. You specifically, what's your response to
that? Yeah, I'll take it. If some people are saying that, I don't know who they are, but we'll take whatever titles we can get. We're talking about it's influencers today, aren't we?
Yeah, it's relevant on the mind because we had Jess Flack from Ubiquitous, CEO of Ubiquitous, on the show, and I kind of like the intro style that we've been rolling with recently. So why don't you describe Jess and kind of just keep it in the back of your head that she may never get another job if you don't describe her well.
Yeah, so Jess has a really interesting background. She went to film school, which I always have a lot of respect for people that went to film school because the bar that most film schools have for getting through the program is pretty high. So being able to come out with that and then apply it to marketing. So she jumped into an agency, and that's really her background is, using video to leverage marketing. And so that really came to a T when a music platform or a music label went to them, the agency that she was working with, to help grow these singles. And so what platform would be better for that? None other than TikTok. So that's where they specialize now, is influencer marketing, not just on TikTok, but they kind of specialize, and that's where they started. So we're going to be talking today about influencer marketing, TikTok. We're going to find out how up to date Adam is with all that, and have a good time while we're doing it.
Yeah, we can answer that one right off the bat. Yeah, a couple things that I think stuck out to me is, like you said, she went to art school, film school, and then in the roles that she played at the different agencies and then at Bellhop, some people may have heard of, tech startup, it was very, which one is the creative side? Left brain? Which side is creative? Is that left or right?
Right.
Right brain. Okay. So I'm definitely right brain because I don't know things like that. I feel like left brain people would know for sure. But anyway.
I think that whole thing is a scam, though. I think that's what they've figured out.
Some
hot takes.
Anyway, the artistic side of her brain that she developed in school, she actually was tasked with and responsible with using the other side when it comes to growth marketing or performance marketing, which is, I think, a really unique blend. Most people have one experience in one or the other. And what it's allowed Jess to do, and we should describe what Ubiquitous is, it's a influencer connecting platform. So if you're a brand, if you're a business that is trying to reach a certain audience, and you've probably heard about influencers, unknowingly maybe, you've probably experienced the impact of an influencer on some purchase decision that you made. What Ubiquitous does, what Jess and her team do, is help identify what the right influencer, who the right influencer might be for your brand, and then manage that relationship. Because there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of input that has to happen in terms of what the creative looks like, when it gets posted, what the messaging is, what's the impact and the results and the analysis afterwards. So there's a whole ecosystem around that, and Ubiquitous helps people manage that. But anyway, to Jess, she just that is what I came away with. She has this powerhouse mind that's able to think and act both on the creative side as well as the data side, and I thought that was pretty unique.
Yeah, that's great. I was also thinking about our audience, and a lot of them, well, I wouldn't say a lot. I'd say a good portion of our audience is more in the B2B space, and I think when a lot of them hear influencer marketing, they may think, well, that's not for me, or that's maybe roll their eyes a little bit. But really what you're doing when you do influencer marketing is you're borrowing somebody else's audience, right? Mm-hmm. So I think if you don't think it's so much of like, oh, this is a silly dance or whatever, and think about it more that there are people in your space that have an audience. And so if you can find a way to borrow that audience in exchange for money, it can be of value. So, get creative. Think about the different ways that you can leverage trends. Think about the different ways that you can leverage the ways that people are interacting in this new media of video, and specifically video with a combination of audio or music or different things. And think about that as a way to gain more of an audience on your own through borrowing other people's.
100%. And, on our last episode, we talked about the idea of making something that you would enjoy consuming,
Yeah.
right? And so, to your point about the B2B people who maybe think influencers aren't for them, if you know who Gary Vee is, if you know who Seth Godin is, or who am I thinking of? The 4 Hour Workweek guy, Tim
Yeah.
Ferriss, maybe needs to do more branding on his name. Or if there's any person who you look up to in the business environment that's creating content, you look up to an influencer. That's what that person is. So it's not about being a direct to consumer versus B2B. I think that's a fallacy
Yeah.
people fall into, but absolutely applicable for those types of businesses. So the one other thing I wanted to say just about Jess is, and we get into this in the conversation, but something that I learned from specifically was just how quickly and how dynamically she's adjusted from working in agencies to working at a tech startup, leading growth, being responsible for that on the performance side, on the data side, to being the CEO of a funded technology startup. There's so many different hats that you have to be, and so much adaptation that has to happen in that process. And it was just encouraging to me as someone who considers myself a generalist in some ways as well, that that can be a strength.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to just be something that you want to go in on one thing. Having that top of funnel ability across multiple areas is really impactful in a role like what Jess has.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you're not on TikTok yourself.
True, which I'm not. So yeah.
Not to belabor that point, but let's jump into the episode.
All right, we've got Jess Flack, CEO of Ubiquitous, here on the show with us. Jess, thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you. Obviously, we're just talking offline, all things Atlanta, Chattanooga, Nashville, bellhop. So we've got plenty of overlap, I think, in our respective careers. But one thing that we are different on is you, from what I can tell, I think you seem to have a very good grasp of what's going on in the TikTok world. I understand it theoretically, but just haven't made the dive. And so for a newbie like me, or maybe somebody else who's listening, give us maybe either your favorite like TikTok genre, or if you have a specific TikToker, what are we missing out on?
Oh man. I mean, TikTok is the most like fun and entertainment forward social platform out there. I don't know if you ever got into Vine whenever Vine was a thing. Like I absolutely loved Vine. It came out whenever I was like in college, and me and all my friends were obsessed with it, and then it just died off. And TikTok felt like a resurgence of that Vine energy. And so I spend quite a bit of time on TikTok, as you can imagine. Favorite like genres. I mean, I love any kind of dry, dark humor, even, and some of the like small like short sketches are typically where I lean. So my For You page is very curated with these very random comedians and everything. PD USA is one of my favorites.
Okay.
He does sketches, but he plays all the characters, and it's just super dry.
I love that.
Very random and kind of absurdist, but fun. And he's also done a great job of like incorporating branded content into like brands into his content in a really organic way, where it's kind of self-aware but hilarious each time. So
I think that's definitely the thing I missed the most from Vine. Was there was these individual creators who would do great skits, or what do you call them, sketches, and then there would be like these crews, that would roll around and create together, and you'd see some of your and that was so much fun. And I know that happens on TikTok a ton, so I know I'm missing out. We'll have to fix that at some point.
I'll send you over a list of some of your first follows for sure.
Yeah, that would be great. So I know comedy is big on there, but there's also a ton that's happening. Are we still alive? Can you hear me, Jess?
Yeah, I can hear you, but your video did just cut out.
That's fine. It'll get in the cloud.
Okay.
Johnny, just take that out.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so obviously, comedy is a big part of TikTok, but there's a ton going on, and actually a lot more going on when it comes to brand activations. People, I think it started a lot with D2C stuff, and now it's extended to enterprise and bigger brands. And that's what you all at Ubiquitous do to some extent. Help. I mean, I know you do other things as well, but TikTok's a big push. Maybe give us just the background of how, where you came from, what the journey through Bellhop was like, and then how you and I believe Alex got Ubiquitous going.
Yeah. So, I mean, my background, so I actually I studied film in school. So not marketing, but through my degree, I did an internship at a marketing agency and just kind of fell in love with marketing. It felt like it incorporated the creative elements of filmmaking that I really enjoy, but also the kind of data and deep analysis needed to, execute good marketing campaigns. So I started working for that agency after college, worked there for 3-4 years, and then worked at another agency for a shorter stint, but was really hungry for going in-house and going deep with a brand, specifically in the startup world, in the VC space. And honestly, whenever I first started looking at opportunities, I thought I'd have to move somewhere else because I was in Chattanooga at the time, but found Bellhop, and they had ideal position open on their performance marketing team. So joined at Bellhop. I believe it was in 2018, late 2018, and spent the next 3 years there, just getting to work with some of the brightest minds in marketing that I had ever been around, and also got such great exposure into growth stage of a startup, going through Series B, Series C, what fundraising looks like, and helping prepare all those decks. So kind of got my feet wet during my stint at Bellhop with the VC world. And I'll be honest, whenever Ubiquitous first started, I would love to say that we had this very clear vision of, it turning into what it is today. But it really started off as a side project. You mentioned Alex, and so he and I worked at Bellhop together, and we had been doing just some contract work on the side. It was 2020. The world had just shut down. We had a lot of spare time on our hands, and we got connected with this music label. They were wanting to have us build their strategy for promoting artist singles, and it was also at the high, or kind of the rise of TikTok. We still haven't really experienced the height because it just continues to grow.
Right.
But so that was my first kind of entry into downloading the TikTok app, realizing that it is like just such a unique and fun social experience. It really does drive culture in so many different ways. Specifically for music, whenever we were looking into that, but really it just kind of opened up a lot of doors as we kept testing the channel, started bringing on different clients, started working closer with different creators, and that testing and kind of contract work, side job setup, that was over about a year, and then we formed Ubiquitous in April of 2021. And we had a team of about 10 to 15 until October of 2021. We closed on a $5 million seed round, and we're able to bring on more team members. And today we're about 50 team members total, including, contract workers. So yeah, a lot of growth. It's been really exciting. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, it's just been this really organic process. And I think what we've done right is we took the approach of really getting to learn the industry and understand the problems of why it's tough for brands to deploy and scale a meaningful amount of capital into the platform, but also really understand what the creators are experiencing too, because a lot of them are 19 years old and just experience this overnight success. Growing a following on TikTok is very different than on Instagram and YouTube, where it takes time and years of consistent content development, and people can see overnight success on TikTok in a very different way because of the way that the platform distributes content. So it's very exciting, very fast moving.
Yeah, I want to get into some of the intricacies of the platform, especially with your performance marketing background and the way that you think about that. But I want to ask a couple things about what you said there about your story. So first is, you said you were at an agency and then you decided you wanted to go inside brand side, and specifically with a startup. I think that's really interesting, because I don't think there's a ton of marketers who, like, I would say the default is either agency or brand side. And then startup is like thrown in there sometimes, for marketers anyway. So what was the impetus there, or what made you want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've always had dreams of being an entrepreneur, being a business owner. And so, getting to know what the fundraising environment looked like felt like, a good step in accomplishing my own goals. But even beyond that, I think a unique element that startups have are that as a marketer, you're tasked with this challenge of taking a product or a feature and going to market with it. Whenever you're working at larger corporations where they kind of either have been around for a long time, have a lot of brand awareness, you're typically, as a performance marketer, very focused on low funnel, high intent channels, creating small efficiencies along the way and these incremental tests. And although I find that very exciting, I think with startups, you have less of a playbook. And so it's more of this black box that you get to create within and take bigger swings. So that's what excited me about going to a startup specifically. It was, okay, there is no playbook, so let's write it,
Yeah. Great training too, for obviously what you were eventually going to do, and with Ubiquitous. But then going from where you were leading marketing, doing marketing in-house, to now being the CEO of a funded startup, leading a team of 50, like that's just that's a big change, right? In a fairly short amount of time. How have you managed that, and what have you been learning as you've been going through that process?
I mean, it would be remiss of me to not also give kudos to the people around me. I'm very fortunate in just having an incredible support system, and collaborative executive team that helps me make a lot of these decisions. And I think I also just early on had to get comfortable with saying when I didn't know the answer or reaching out for help. I think a lot of CEOs, business owners can start to go down the wrong paths because they feel like they need to be the ultimate decision maker. But I think what's best for organizations are, of course, there needs to be someone that is ultimately the throat to choke. But at the same time, just being comfortable with the collaboration and pulling in others whenever you're not sure exactly what the next step needs to be, or you need that counsel. So it's not all just built off of my back. It's definitely been a really collaborative, transparent, open process, and I'm very fortunate by the support of all the people around me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, maybe flipping a little bit to Ubiquitous itself, and I think the overall industry of influencer marketing. Originally, when that trend began, I think it was pretty one-to-one and not as data centered. It was like, oh, I think that person has an audience that I'm interested in. Let me reach out and see if I can send them free swag or something like that. Yeah, the really early versions. Obviously, that's evolved a ton. And so now looking at it as a performance marketer, and we should say what performance marketing is, I guess. I mean, but maybe you could just describe that mindset from what you were doing before and how that plays out in the influencer market specifically.
Yeah, definitely. So you're right, and that influencer marketing has definitely evolved over time. I know even from my days at Bellhop, I mean, we considered influencer spend brand spend, so it didn't go into the same line item on our P&Ls each month. It was still considered CAC, but it was in the same bucket as like billboards or these out of home campaigns. But as the industry has matured, because it's still a very young and emerging industry, so have the technologies around it to support attribution. But also, I think brands are understanding the relationship that even branded top of funnel channels can play within your other performance marketing channels. And what I mean by that is, for if you're a brand who's already spending money on Google ads, on SEM, you have placements on, Yelp, and you have all of these, high intent, low funnel channels already active. You will find that the more that you invest in influencer campaigns, over time, you'll see the performance become more efficient on these low funnel campaigns. So oftentimes whenever we're working with brands, yes, we include UTM tracking parameters in our tracking links that all the influencers deploy. We include, unique coupon codes if it's, relevant to that product or brand. But at the same time, we also are clear in that you have to measure and analyze the impact on your direct traffic and your organic traffic and your paid traffic, and kind of correlate the lift that you see in those traffic lines at the time that the posts go live. And then also, the more frequently you're testing influencer campaigns, you can also really hone in on, yes, that percentage lift, but also what is the attribution window look like? Do you see it start to trail off after 7 days of the post being live? And how can you create this, multi-touch attribution to get a closer and more realistic picture of ROI from the channel? So, it's not a perfect science, but attribution is never perfect. And any of us that have spent money on Facebook ads know that even a pixel will cannibalize your performance, or, the performance on your website. And pixels tend to be kind of greedy. And there's, even as a performance marketer, you have to look at the full picture of your entire marketing funnel and understand the relationships of each tactic that you're utilizing to get a more realistic picture of what's going to move the needle forward.
You mentioned that there's a correlation between when you run the influencer campaign and like some top of funnel things, whether that be search or whatever. Are you saying that just based on traffic, like the increased traffic then adds to organic results?
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely. Like when influencer posts go live, you kind of have to analyze your own behavior online and on your mobile devices specifically. I mean, in late 2020, iOS 14 came out, and it really hurt pixel tracking for all performance channels because we lost a lot of cross-device attribution in tracking. So from that shift, it kind of put a lot of other channels that didn't have pixels on a more even playing field, because marketers had to become a lot more analytical with their data and couldn't just rely on what the pixel was telling them. It contributed to their top line. They also had to, analyze where are we seeing lift on these these other on organic and direct specifically, because oftentimes if you're on TikTok, you're on your phone just in general, and you see an ad, you may click through within that session. You may pull open another browser and type it in directly. Mm-hmm. If it's an expensive product with a higher AOV, you're most likely going to go to your desktop computer or your laptop and want to complete the purchase there. And so because user behavior is hard to predict and it's not perfect, that kind of method or approach to analyzing data applies to not only influencer marketing, but really all of your marketing channels.
Yeah. Zooming out
and turning something off, seeing what pulls back, measure that impact.
Yeah. Zooming out and getting that whole picture. One thing that you all talk about that I think is really important, because of, we've gotten so used to real-time analytics and user behavior, tracking and being able to see, okay, what's the impact of, like you just said, if we turn this off, okay, what happened 10 minutes later? Like, can we see exactly what's going on? And that's hard with sometimes non-pure digital plays, And so I think on with Ubiquitous, you all have talked about having like a 7-day testing period, I think, or something pretty reasonable. How have you formed that? And like, just what are the parameters around that? Why do you think that there's a certain specific time that you can be like, all right, this either is or isn't working in terms of the effectiveness of the campaign?
Yeah. So the 7 days I think would be most applicable to like viewing the performance. So actually like that's our standard kind of like attribution window that we would apply to post going live. But with new brands, now we are able to work with people just on a single month, and then, we can review the results and then talk about a longer term agreement. But our suggestion to most brands is to set aside enough budget for at least 3 months worth of testing. And honestly, I would suggest that for really any tactic that you're adding into your playbook is to give it a solid 3 months. And for the first month to kind of test more broad. For influencers, that can look like, trying a few macro or hero creators that have more facial recognition, that, have larger followings on the platform. And then also testing, a larger amount of these micro creators that maybe don't have a follower count. They could have anywhere from, 50,000 to 500,000 on TikTok. And, testing the micros against the macros, just throwing out an example of how you can kind of test broad, then track the results. And then the next month leaning into what worked, pulling away from what didn't, and then including new tests. So, and then the third month honing in even more. I would suggest for brands to view it with that kind of 3-month investment, before making a, go, no go decision on the long-term strategy. Because after 3 months, you'll be able to truly measure the impact of what these influencer campaigns have done to your overall brand awareness. And, you should hopefully, with a successful campaign, be able to see not only an increase in your overall traffic and in your organic and, the things that I've mentioned before, but even CR through your order flow. If you're educating your audience and bringing new people to the site, then, the goal should be to also increase each step of the funnel, increase the CR all the way through. So 3 months is typically what we suggest for a testing period, to really understand what the long-term strategy should be and how much money you should be allocating from your total marketing budget each month.
What about, I feel like with every ad product or new ad product, at some point we figure out a way to automate it. Even podcasts now, you can buy programmatic podcast ads that are host read, which is crazy. Do you see a programmatic component coming to what you all do?
Definitely. I do, but there are some caveats there. So currently the influencer marketing landscape, there are kind of two major categories or buckets. You have agencies, that are marketing agencies. They typically have a roster of creators that they work with. It can be pretty small, it could be a talent agency that just has 20 to 30 creators, or for some of these marketing agencies, maybe it's a few hundred that they frequently work with. Mm-hmm. And brands can go to them, spend money, they deploy the budget. Great, more traditional. Then you have SaaS platforms out there, and that's like Grin or Creator IQ. They are kind of like the Yellow Pages or the Yelp of influencer marketing, and that they're a great research tool to find potential creator targets, view a lot of their channel or their channel analytics, and some of their audience demographics. So those are very helpful, but you still, as the brands, have to go through the process of finding them, reaching out to them, negotiating the rates, going through content creation and development, getting the post live, and then payment. And I mean, especially if I think back to 2 years ago, whenever I first started testing this channel, I mean, it took me about 100 hours to source, it was 500 creators for potential song promotion, find all their contact info, reach out to all of them, negotiate the rates, and ultimately got us down to about 200 that responded and kind of confirmed their rates. So it's a very manual process.
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of the trouble with scaling it for in-house teams comes from. Is it's just not a very scalable channel in its current state. I would describe Ubiquitous as kind of the hybrid between these two models. We're a managed marketplace, so we have the data of these SaaS platforms. We have hundreds of data points on every creator in our network, and we have a network of close to 5,000 creators at this point that have joined, opted in, given us all their contact information. So we have a direct line to these creators, which is also kind of a bonus for brands, because if you're going through one of those SaaS self-serve platforms, you're messaging through their app and through their internal system. And so you're kind of relying on the creator also utilizing that desktop app, which creators don't really like doing. Yeah. They're kind of living and dying by their phones. So that is a big bonus. But we also have the fully managed, from strategy to creative development, performance tracking. We manage the process end to end. So going back to your original question, with automating the process and where I see Ubiquitous kind of playing into the space in the future, we all, in a lot of ways internally, are a product team. We're very product led. We're always looking for automation opportunities. What can we do to make the process more efficient? And that is our goal, is building products and solutions that fit the needs of both brands and creators. But there will always be a level of a human overlay to our business model, because we know that you need that quality control, and you also need experts in the field that know how to accomplish the goals that you're setting out to accomplish as a brand, and what kind of strategies have worked for all of these other brands in a similar vertical. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like, especially with something that's a little bit more novel or new, like what we're talking about, it requires that extra management and kind of hand holding from
for sure
for the marketer. last two questions. The first is kind of extending that idea. Then the other thing I'd say that happens is first you see automation, and then alongside of that, you kind of get pushed down into the SMB market. What tips or what education or what advice would you give to the SMB owners or marketers who are focusing on that area as they're just beginning to get involved maybe with influencer marketing? Maybe you don't even have the full budget to go deep yet, but how would you recommend them getting started there?
Yeah, I would say that with TikTok in particular, it is really driving culture right now. And so rather than kind of putting influencer marketing into a box of, okay, I pay this creator, then they post about it on their channel, and then I cross my fingers and hope that I get traffic to my site and people convert to the level that I need them to continue investing. Look at it as like these are basically your brand ambassadors and like freelancers in a way, and they're creating content. So what are other ways that you can utilize that content to yield the most value out of it? You can buy the creative licensing for all the videos that they create, and whether they're posting it to their channels or you're using it on your organic channels, you can use it on your website, you can use it in your ads. Like, find as much utility from each post as possible, so that you're squeezing, all the juice out of that investment, especially as a small business owner, because, there is a lot of content on TikTok. And so sometimes it can take a meaningful budget to make a big splash, and to really see, a surge of traffic, like for a product launch or a big release. Like, you'll want to make a big splash. And so for a smaller business, I say, test it out small, decide what is a digestible amount for me to spend within this given month that won't just, hurt my long-term or hurt my CAC for that month. And then look for as much utility from each post that you have created. And also look at it even as a PR play. Something really interesting is, you mentioned this earlier, that we're seeing different brands. Like, it used to be pretty much only, D2C brands deploying influencer spend, but now we're seeing more enterprise, more B2B. And I think a really cool, unique strategy for SMBs and for B2B companies is to almost craft your own narrative using influencers on the platform. Create a trend, create some kind of story, and then circulate that through your PR channels and get some press around it. Just think outside of the box. Find as much application and utility from each post that you're creating, and don't view it as this like water hose kind of channel that you just turn it on and things explode overnight. That does happen, especially with TikTok, but it's more of the fringe case, that something could go viral just off of a single post. And instead view it as you're building an irrigation system, you're building a long-term strategy, and you're building this overall narrative that then you can push through all of these other channels. And it is something that it's a channel that I am confident can work for nearly any brand or service, just with the right application.
Yeah, it feels to me like TikTok is paying off on a promise that Snap made. A bunch of maybe 6 or 7 years ago, Snap was like, we are going to be your camera. We're going to be the camera you use for everything. And for a marketer, I think that's what TikTok has become in a lot of ways. Like, you see TikTok content everywhere. You see it on Twitter, you see it in emails, you see it in Facebook ads. And that's just because it's evolved what content is. Like, that format is so engaging and so that everybody wants it. Everybody's trying to consume it. And so the smarter marketers, to your point, are saying, okay, well, even if I don't have that audience on TikTok, I can use that in my paid ads. I can use that on my YouTube shorts and my Instagram reels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's almost ubiquitous. I hate that I even just said that. I hate that I even just said that. But
no, I love it because I'm so guilty of using it and like being cheesy as hell internally. So it's perfect.
I have 2 boys now, so I can like say dad jokes like that and blame it on them.
You got your dad card choke or
yeah,
your dad
exactly.
card now.
Well, this has been awesome, Jess. I appreciate you coming on and sharing about Ubiquitous and some ideas on how folks can use influencer marketing. Just as maybe a final takeaway, and then we'll also want to hear where people can keep up with you. But what just has you excited? What's coming on the horizon? What either internally or in the space that you're particularly focused on?
Oh man, I mean, there are so many different things. I mean, I'm really excited. For us, we are launching our new a new kind of creator app experience that will be really helpful not only to create more efficiency within our current processes or for our current campaigns, but also really support the creator community as a whole. Like I said, because we started with this approach of understanding the industry, we got really close with a lot of creators, and they also need a lot of support when it comes to standardizing the rates, making sure that they're not getting taken advantage of, or overcharging and missing out on opportunities because they don't understand the marketing space.
Sure.
But also opportunities when it comes to supporting them. They're really entrepreneurs in their own right, and a lot of them need help when it comes to managing their business in an efficient way, and filing taxes and all of that random stuff. So yeah, there's a lot to it. So I'm excited about the next gen of the creator experience with Ubiquitous, and ultimately just supporting a lot of these creators because they're doing really cool things, and we just want to make sure that they have the structure and the support to do them long term and as their full-time career. So
awesome. And if people want to keep up with the team, what you all are doing, as well as you yourself, where's the best place for them to look all that up?
Yeah, so you can go to ubiquitousinfluence.com. We got, a blog with a lot of great content on there, some case studies, testimonials, and then follow us on social. So we're at Ubiquitous Official on all social platforms. So definitely give us a follow. Shout out to our internal marketing team because they've been posting a lot of great content. So definitely check out our YouTube channel and LinkedIn in particular if you're looking for some edutainment content. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us, Jess. We'll catch up soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Adam.